have audio at this end.
Will it let me record? Okay.
So that.
Let's run, let that run off the front, so it's. We just won't touch it very much.
That should be switching over.
Now this is connected to the internet again.
Hmm?
This one's connected again. Yeah,
I just don't know why it's not,
yeah, there's not a strong signal.
I've got full signal. It's just
Oh.
not, the HDMI cord is not. I have a different HDMI cord in my bag. It's 5 feet long. Where does that HDMI cord go to? Not mic in the speaker.
Oh, it looks like the HDMI cord is out.
Yeah, she just took it out.
Oh, okay.
To reconnect to Easter room. She's prepared, but with a 25-foot cord.
So from standpoint of equipment changes, right now.
Take the cable out of the TV where it was. Yeah. It came on one.
So what we would like to do, the fire apparatus. Probably my purpose. So basically, they'll kind of not. Eventually, they can use my.
Doesn't like HDMI one. Okay. Yep,
Are you all set?
I believe so. Hey, Jeff,
Jeff, we're back in business.
I believe. Don't jinx me. They can. Audio obviously stayed. I believe so.
Okay. We're back in business here, I understand. And I'm on. Let's move forward. So this is our roadmap for today. We started talking about why we're here and the work to date. Press record.
Okay.
We'll talk a little bit about why this matters. We'll do a recap of the first community conversation, which also includes some information about the priorities that we established with the fire department. And then we'll explore some options for, what does that mean for the fire department moving forward? And then, of course, we love to get feedback because that's what this whole exercise is about, is hearing from the community. So again, the mission of our work here is to find the balance. Obviously the fire department knows what they would love to have, but what they would love to have and what the community is prepared to support and can afford to support may be different things. So we're trying to find that balance here. And a big part of this, what we went through last time, is finding the shared priorities. What's important to the fire department, what's important to the members of the community. So we've been through the Mitchell Associates study, which again is available on the website. We evaluated that against the existing site, the building, and the program. We met with the fire department to prioritize. And then, of course, in community conversation number one, back in January, we did our interactive survey, and we got some good results, and we want to talk a little bit about those moving forward. So I'm going to do a very brief recap of some of the things we talked about in the first community conversation under the why it matters. You know, the station design, it really impacts the health, safety, the volunteerism, and the response time for firefighting services. And this has changed a lot. Many years ago, I did a fire station. I was just talking about it while we were solving the technology back in Bloomfield, Connecticut. It was my first big fire station. And I can tell you that the way that we design fire stations today is very different from the way that we designed them then, because what we've come to understand is that there's a lot of health risks that come back from the fire scene to the fire station. And, you know, what we're doing is we're creating this environment where the firefighters are bringing back potential contaminants on their equipment, the fire apparatus, their turnout gear, and they're bringing it back to the station where they're living or working or training. And what's happening is, you know, we expose, they're exposed to a risk, but then we compound it because we don't provide the proper safety measures in the fire station to separate them from that risk and to clean up, quite frankly, the equipment and make sure that we mitigate that risk. So that's been a big change. You know, I've been doing public safety buildings now for more than 36 years. And that's a change in the way that we approach things. We're far more conscious about the risks that come back on the apparatus and on the equipment to the fire station and how it affects the people that are operating there. That is the biggest change in the fire service from a building standpoint. Obviously, there is a lot of training that goes on. You know, we've spent the last couple of years nationally talking about you know, the importance of training from the police side of things. But I have to tell you that on the fire side of things, training is equally as important. And I have been to your fire department on numerous occasions, dropping in and seeing the active training that goes on, because you do rely on a lot of volunteerism in this community. And those volunteers need to be trained. They need to understand what they're facing in terms of dealing with the equipment, but also dealing with the fire response. So all of these are important factors that directly impact your community. So we talked about apparatus bay height and width. You know, that's a big thing. When the vehicle bays are very tight, it makes a dangerous situation, particularly when your emergency response. I like to tell the story of when my son was a Boy Scout. We went to the local fire station, and you know, the fire department was very gracious and showed us all of their equipment, and they were opening up the compartments on the sides of the truck. So they opened up these doors and we could see the equipment inside. And while we were there, an alarm went off. Somebody had a fire. They needed an emergency response. And so we moved all the Boy Scouts to the back of the apparatus bay so they'd be out of the way. And the firefighters jumped in their vehicle and started egressing the fire department. Unfortunately, one of those doors was still open. And when the fire truck went to exit out the apparatus bay doors, that door hit the overhead door jamb. And of course, everybody in the truck got a big surprise, but they also destroyed the track system for the overhead doors. Making sure that you have the ability to work and operate safely, and you're not dealing with things. In this case, the only thing that got damaged was an overhead door track. But imagine if a person had been there and gotten struck by that. So, you know, these are important things to think about. Way more accidents happen inside the fire station than actually happen in the fire scene. So we've got to protect that. We already talked about health. We talked about training. And of course, you know, making sure that in the live work environments that we're not bringing those contaminants from the fire scene back to the firefighters. So a little bit of summary of the feedback. Let's see, over on the left, we got a couple of bubbles that say 100% of the participants in the last meeting, the last community meeting, saw a need to improve the fire station. 86% of those people want the apparatus bays sized for future equipment. There's some degrees of how far into the future that goes, but the vast majority wanted to see some improvement in that. What I think ultimately what we arrived at is there was no real consensus on the future training. We'll look at those scores here in a minute to see what that means. But top community priorities were firefighter health. Interestingly enough, the top fire department priorities was firefighter health, operational safety, and bay capacity. So you and the fire department, the community and the fire department agreed on the top 3 priorities for their fire department. That's important because this alignment is, it can help us make decisions about what we actually do in response to the fire department need. So again, here's the survey results. And by the way, some of you were on your phones during the last meeting. Some of you actually filled in paper forms. We actually put the paper responses into these results. So they could be slightly different from what we saw live in the last meeting. But we asked, do you see a need? And this is that first bullet point I just read. 100% of the people said, yes, we see a need. The next question we start to lead into to what needs to be resolved. So again, we asked about the priorities, and once again, back on those previous bubbles, we all agreed that the top 3 priorities were firefighter health, operational safety, and then the bay capacity. And then we started getting into some more detailed stuff. To what extent should training facilities be included in the design solution? You can see this is a scale. So from 0, don't include, to 3, solve for the future, we ended up with a combined score of 1.8, which says basically it's above match existing. It's just slightly below improve existing. So what we take that to mean is that, some additional training opportunities would make sense. But what I'm sort of reading out of it, we got to balance that, with what the cost is, what the impact is on the program. And then we asked about office space. Once again, you can see that the results from don't include to solve for the future fell in at about 1.7, which says that, yeah, okay, we need to think about the office space, the workspace for people, but maybe not to the extent that the Mitchell Associates study indicated. So there should be some balance here in how we approach creating the office space. And we asked about living accommodations. There was pretty good response, almost 1.9 on our scale of 3, that say we should improve the kitchen, dining, day room facilities. That's the daytime and, quite frankly, even the evening time operations, so that the firefighters can cook a meal or have space to work out of the station during the daytime. There was a slightly lesser response in terms of sleeping quarters. Basically what this is we do see a lot of fire departments thinking about the future and the need for 24-hour response. What we hear from the community is, yeah, we need to think about it. We need to think about storm coverage, but maybe we're not yet ready to embrace the capacity for 24-hour operations here. At that 1.3, I would say that, we're looking at some provisions, but not a lot of provisions. Should apparatus space be sized for the future? Let's see, we had a 19-3 vote in favor of yes. There's some more to tell on that story coming up. Should firematic support spaces, and these are the spaces that right now are in your apparatus space, but would, by current design standards, should be separated from those bays. Again, and we talked about some of the details about that at the last meeting, but we had results that said 20-1 that we should be thinking about this and the safety components that go along with that. And okay, again, emergency response related spaces. What approach should we utilize? So this is more about thinking about the future. And so keep what you have. Nobody jumped on board that bus. fix what you have. Of the respondents, we had about a third of people said fix what you have. And then about 2/3 said plan for the future. So, so we do think that there is community support for improving the situation. How far into the future is a question that comes up later. Oh, look at, here it is. This is an interesting one. How far in the future should we plan? We had one vote for 1 to 5 years. And then we split on 5 to 10, 10 to 20, and 20+ years. And I did explain the last time that when we start talking about 20+, it's a little bit of crystal ball math here. You know, I don't know in 20+ years, 25 years, 30 years, what the community looks like. All I can do is think about what are the things that I could do to help you be ready for that. In 5 to 10 years, it's a little bit easier. You know, we were having a conversation while we were sorting out the technology earlier about future apparatus. And although I don't know that I see a lot of brand new equipment that you don't have today, there is the possibility of equipment retiring, getting beyond its useful life, and needing to replace it. And one of the issues that happens with an older fire station is that if your door sizes and your bay sizes are very limited, the fire department has to go to the equipment manufacturer and say, this is all the space we have. And so they have to custom design the apparatus to fit the space, which is much more costly than, you know, the off-the-shelf stuff. Everybody knows if you go to the store and you buy the off-the-shelf stuff, it comes at a price. If you got to custom design it, it comes at a bigger price. So what we are thinking about when we look into the future for the short term is how do we make sure that maybe there's a little bit more depth in those bays so that you can buy the off-the-shelf equipment instead of the custom equipment, as equipment requires replacement. So, where am I at? So these are basically our takeaways from the results. From a training facility standpoint, what we read from the results is that modest improvement in the training facilities would make some sense. Hold on, I got a question coming. Can you do a mic? I'm sorry.
Push the button there too, Rita, please, until it turns green. Yes. It turned green.
I have two questions.
Of course.
One is when you, and I wasn't at the first meeting. One is, okay,
Yeah, we can repeat it if this is.
when the people here either scanned their phones or turned in the written response, were the firefighters included in those responses?
I don't believe any of the firefighters used the Mentimeter on the night of the prior conversation.
Okay, I wondered if the figures were skewed. And then the other thing is, what is a firematic support space?
Okay, that is a good question. That's one of those industry terminology things. What is firematic support? There's a lot of things that go into that. The number one and primary issue that we think about from a safety standpoint is where do you store the turnout gear? What's turnout gear? It's the coats, it's the helmets, it's the boots, it's the pants, the actual stuff that the firefighters wear. And for many, many, many years, we stored turnout gear right in the apparatus bay. So the trucks would go, you know, the turnout gear would be right there. You'd run out of the bay, you'd don your gear, you'd hop on the truck, you'd go to the fire, you'd come back from the fire, and you may put your turnout gear in the cleaning equipment, but basically all of the contaminants that come back on the equipment are sitting right beside your turnout gear, the stuff that you actually wear on your body. That's one kind of firematic equipment. Another kind of firematic equipment is all the tools they use, whether it's the jaws of life, whether it's a chainsaw, whether it's a generator. These are all pieces of equipment that go out to the fire scene and then come back to the station. Another one is the SCBA room, the self-contained breathing apparatus space. So a lot of old firefighters, they have the compressor where they fill the breathing tank that the firefighters put on their back, and they wear a mask with a hose. They fill that right inside the apparatus bay. Best practices say you have a separate room for that, which has weather stripping. Basically, what we're trying to do is isolate the air from the apparatus bay and pull clean air from the outside so that we're putting good, clean air into the oxygen, the breathing tank. And then we also have a place to clean that gear. So if a firefighter goes out to the scene and comes back and his mask has been used, they have a place to properly clean it. NFPA, the National Fire Protection Association, has standards for how you go about cleaning that gear. But again, to me, this is one of the big ones. Right next to turnout gear, this is the big one. Is, if I'm going into a fire, do I want to be breathing air that came from the air that was shared with the equipment from the last fire? And what we know about carcinogens and the other chemicals that are in there, to me, that's one that makes me uncomfortable. There are some other spaces, the medical equipment for stocking your medical supplies on the apparatus. That usually gets a separate room as opposed to stored in the apparatus bay. Water, firefighters, because they're dealing with fires, they need water storage, they need ice storage. Can you get that off the bays so that it's segregated? Did I go? Oh, good. I did them all.
Any space or area that supports the operations within to and from a response. So it's the housing of that equipment, housing of that gear, the capacity to decontaminate. It's really in support of that operational response to and from the station.
Which, by the way, brings you to the one that I did miss, the decontamination space. NFPA has, again, standards for how you bring back equipment, you clean it up and make sure it's ready for use. And that's medical equipment as well as fire. Yes, you have a question? Can you
Come up here, please? And turn it on, please. We're recording this.
This ain't step exercise.
Sorry, I never followed. No, I was just wondering what was the total response for the survey? How many responses you got? And you're saying none of the firefighters.
Like 21.
22, yeah, 20 to 22, depending on the question.
22.
Yeah.
22.
Representation of what the whole town is. Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
Okay, let's see. I was going through feedback. We heard about office space, the shared workspace, maybe some limited offices, living accommodations. We heard some minimal sleeping quarters, better kitchen, dining, and day room. That scored much better than the living quarters. Apparatus bays that we really want to make sure that we're sizing for the current equipment, maybe a little bit of future consideration. Firematic support spaces, provide as separate spaces where it makes sense. And then emergency response, improve what exists with a vision towards the future, though not necessarily, if I look at that 777 category, when I look at 20 plus years, I've got 15 votes to the left of that. When I look at 10 to 20 years, I've got 8 votes to the left of that and 7 votes to the right of that. So, when I look at the quantity of votes, I'm probably falling somewhere in that 15 to 20 year range. Not a lot of people are in favor at this point of going 20 plus years. Although it did get almost a third of the votes, there's a lot more people that voted to the left of that. Okay, so with that in mind, we'll take a revisit of the previous study. This is, again, I know Mitchell Associates. I've worked with them over the years periodically. I certainly encounter them at the conferences. But their program, and again, if you want to see all the detail, you need to go to the town website. But we sort of made a synopsis of those. That they ended up with a program that was about 17,172 square feet. You can see the distribution, with public and training, about just shy of 1,500 square feet, administrative offices shy of 800 square feet, living space just shy of 1,700 square feet, apparatus bays just shy of 6,700 square feet. Firematic support was just shy of 3,400. And of course, miscellaneous, which some of that is, just the things that are necessary to make up a building, wall thicknesses and mechanical space, was about just shy of 3,300 square feet. So that's where we started. That was our baseline for what was proposed back in 2020. So what we did, here's sort of a graphic depiction of that, and it compares it to what you have today. So for instance, for public and training space, today you've got about 550 square feet. The proposal then was almost 1,500 square feet. Office space, you have 0. The proposal was almost 800 square feet. Living space, we counted that 41. Was that tiny kitchenette? Yeah, so compared to 1,650 in that program. The apparatus space, you currently, again, you got 3,562 square feet of bays that don't meet current standards. The proposed was 6,689 square feet. And then, of course, from a firematic support today, separated firematic support, you've got 265 square feet versus 3,371 proposed. There's a pie chart. You can see how that distributes from a pie chart standpoint as well.
I think one thing to additionally note here is we do look at the delta between the two, but that pie chart makeup is also very important. We want to see to what percent of that overall proposed program is comprised of operationally driven space. So we talked about the apparatus space, we talked about the firematic support spaces, ensuring that that makes up the majority of the program and then is supported by those other living and office type environments. And you can see between the apparatus bay and the firematic support, it was about 75% of that proposed program quantity. So that tells us that the allocation is correct. It's just a deeper dive into what is incorporated into each of those different groupings. And that's where we start to analyze that delta between what you have today and what was proposed and dive a little deeper into each individual space included in those categories.
Okay, 2 slides back here. Let me get out of the way. Okay. All right. All right. So with your feedback, we took a look at the program. Basically, we took the Mitchell Associates program, and then we said, okay, let's create a series of options based upon the feedback. Admittedly, I'm looking at what the community said in those responses and making my best judgment. We'll give you a chance to weigh in on my judgment a little bit later. But let's talk about the program elements. Really quickly, I want you to, I got to give you a little bit of homework here about understanding, how we calculate space when we do architecture here. And there's a lot of different ways of looking at how space is utilized. This is actually a slide that we utilized in the last station design conference. All of these give the same number of workstations, but they do it in different ways. And this can be true of many of the spaces inside the facility. So for instance, the far left there says it's almost 600 square feet for 6 workstations. 2 of those are in private offices. 4 of those are in a shared work environment. And then the middle one says, okay, all right, let's be a little more efficient. We get down to, under 500 square feet, where we have 6 workstations in a shared work environment. And then, of course, the last one to the right there says, all right, let's be super efficient. Let's be really, really minimal on our circulation space and get it down to 432 square feet. This is important because every element that we look at in the program and that Mitchell Associates looked at in the program, they think about, okay, we don't know what the building design looks like yet, but we're going to assign the square footage based on certain assumptions. And you can see that when I base them on private offices, I end up with more square footage. When I really get lean and mean, I can get the square footage down. I can lose, 95 plus 78, 68, 170 square feet. and still have 6 workstations. So that's a little bit of the way that we started looking at the program, is not only, you know, where we can be lean about spaces, but how we can use space smarter or more efficiently to help you reduce the overall square footage of the building.
Facilities of this nature, square footage is one of your greatest cost drivers. So that is one reason why we look at with a very tight lens on the square footage itself. Because when you can reduce the square footage, you have the highest direct impact on that overall total project cost.
So again, looking at the arrangements and some of the descriptions, you know, we are trying to maintain program, but reduce area, and then be efficient with the use of our program area. So we have 3 different options. You can see the gray on the left is the 2020 study at 17,172 square feet. Our option 1 was our leanest and meanest at 12,276 square feet. Option 2 came in at about 14.6 thousand square feet. And then option 3 is at about 16.6, all of which are less than the 2020 study, but they also approach things in a different way. I will say take the 5 to 10, 10 to 15 years, 15 plus with a little bit of grain of salt, because I do not have a crystal ball, but it does help us to understand a little bit about, you know, when we might start finding programmatic challenges in the fire station in the future, should we adopt any one of these solutions. So let's talk. Oh, and by the way, there's some basic descriptions in those option bubbles. For instance, option 1 has shared offices, no sleeping quarters, improved day room, and apparatus bays and firematic support. Option 2 has some shared offices, with maybe a private office for the chief, I think it was, a little bit of bunk room space, again, improved day room, training, apparatus and firematic support. And then option 3 is a little bit further along the line. So let's go take a look a little bit further into that. So again, here's the chart similar to the one that we presented earlier, where you can see the gray is the 2020 study and the different categories of option 1, option 2, option 3 is where we adjusted that square footage to. And you can see that from the top category, public training, in the 2020 study, there was 1,436 square feet. Option 1 is, you know, just shy of 360. Option 2 is 1028. And option 3 is, we're gonna tell you how we got to these numbers in a little bit here. It's 1,286. But you can go down the chart and see the differences between the original program and the program options, and how that translates into square footage per category here. No, there is not a reason why we didn't do that, other than we'd covered what the existing is earlier. We could certainly take a look at that and provide that information. Yep.
Option 1 is less than what we currently have. I think some of that
Also is how those different categories were counting existing space versus newly proposed. So we can absolutely add that in comparison to each space, so you can kind of see which spaces are, and we can even go deeper than just the overall category, so that you can kind of see which individual spaces are included in each option existing, as well as the 2020 study. We have all of that data we can share.
Yeah.
Excuse me. When someone
Green
speaks
button.
in,
Yeah, there you go. You're getting the hang of this.
So I have a couple questions. One is, I had heard that you had told us that you're from the town of Hebron, Connecticut.
Yes. Yeah.
And what's the population there?
Oh, Lord.
What's your town?
Approximately. Hebron,
Connecticut, it's, I don't know.
is that less than 5,000?
I think we're more than 5,000. It is a smaller community. Yeah.
It's smaller, so it's similar. Okay, and you said you had just added a bay on your fire
Well,
department?
that's, I'm doing a project right now to extend a bay for their
To
fire
extend a
department.
bay. So can I say, I know you were working off of the original survey of 2020 and has it been considered on doing any kind of renovation, or did we just do a brand new building? I mean, did you assess the needs of the exact square footage of what equipment we might have? And then take our building and see if we can move some equipment around, move some, like the parade vehicle can be stored somewhere else. Were there any alternatives done, or did we just go right for the new building?
So I haven't, drafting a program is not the same as deciding whether it's new construction or renovation. Because when you draft a program, you're saying this of the space needs. Now, in order to satisfy the space needs, you have a number of options.
Right.
One is to build a building.
Right.
Two is to use your existing building to satisfy some of those programmatic elements. And then maybe do